Okay, so now we're recording. So I'm Dan Pontius. I'm the housing policy coordinator here at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. Welcome to our housing committee meeting. Um, and like I said, I'm going to kind of get things started here and then turn it over to our chair, Kim Zanti, to moderate our terrific panel this morning. Um, Here's our agenda. We're asking folks to plug your information into the chat so we can kind of have a sense of who is here on this virtual call. Then we're going to jump into our panel discussion of fair housing testing and enforcement in the DC area. Here's the cover of our 2025 Fair Housing Plan, which we just finished in the middle of last year. It's a 5-year plan. And both of our agenda items here, the fair housing testing and enforcement and the low-income housing tax credit allocations relate to a couple of regional action steps in this plan. So that's sort of, and that's a role that this housing committee has played historically, is sort of a chance for all kinds of interested people and stakeholders in the metropolitan area to kind of engage with us on our on local governments and housing authorities carrying out the plans that we set in these documents. So here is the regional action step that we're really talking about with this panel. And I really want to shout out Susie McClanahan from the Equal Rights Center because she co-chaired our enforcement working group as we were putting together this plan and really helped us pull together this panel too. So thanks very much to Susie. But you can see we have set a goal of setting robust fair housing paired testing and accessibility testing goals in each jurisdiction, and then tracking enforcement actions to establish a deterrent to illegal housing discrimination. And so that is a connection that we've kind of struggled to make, sort of going from the testing to actual enforcement. And so that's what we're really working to learn about from our panel today. And here is our panel. I think Kim will ask folks to introduce themselves as they come up. But here is our terrific panel. I'm really honored that we've got everyone joining us here today. And then also, as a little context, Hillary Chapman with WashCog, kind of my counterpart in the DC metro area, they worked with local governments to pull together their fair housing plan, regional fair housing plan, back in 2023. And so, in addition to the experience of local governments, we're kind of looking into, how can you go from a plan to action that makes a difference on the ground. So, I think that is the end of my slides. And so what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Kim to get our panel started.
Thanks, Dan. Hello again, everybody. I'm Kim Zanti with Howard County Department of Housing and Community Development, the Community Planning and Grants Division. So amazing to see you all here. And as Dan said, it's an honor to have this panel together to learn from everyone as it relates to the Action Step 24 and testing, fair housing testing. So the chat is open. If you have questions as we go along, please put them in the chat and we'll see how things flow and we'll be able to answer your questions. So I'm going to start. Our panelists have had the questions, so we're going to just jump right in. I'm going to start with a question to Deanda and also to Deanda Shelton from Fairfax County Office of Human Rights and Equity. And then, from Amanda, with Amanda Schlenner, and I don't know if Amanda, if I'm saying that right, from the District of Columbia Office of Human Rights and Equity. So, Deanda, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a quick story about how you have pursued fair housing testing and that you funded, and what were the results of the consequences for a property owner or manager? And then on the follow-up question to that is, how did you decide to pursue enforcement and what kind of enforcement resulted?
Good morning, everyone. I'm again Deanda Shelton. I'm the Fair Housing Manager at the Fairfax County Office of Human Rights and Equity Programs. also known as OREP. One of the ways OREP achieves its mission of fair housing law enforcement is through resolution of test-based complaints through conciliation, which is a timely and cost-effective way to address housing discrimination practices uncovered by ERC's testing. Per the county's act and Title 8, conciliation must be attempted on every complaint. Conciliation is facilitated by this office to get parties to reach a mutually satisfactory settlement in lieu of the Human Rights Commission issuing a determination of the evidence of fallacy of the suit. When we've investigated test-based complaints, we've found that respondent staff were either unaware the alleged action is prohibited under the fair housing laws, or staff may not have been adequately trained on the law or on a company's policies and procedures. So when conducting an investigation, we use testing evidence such as the audio recordings and correspondence between the testers and respondent staff to educate respondents about discriminatory housing practices. We view conciliation as a win-win. It fulfills the county's fair housing mandate, and respondents can reduce time and costs associated with the investigation or litigation while promoting their property, and Fairfax County is a great place to live. Specific to our fair housing enforcement of the test that we funded, there was a test for familial status discrimination at an apartment community in Herndon. The tester posed as a member of a family with 3 individuals, parents with a 7-month-old child. The tester inquired about a 1-bedroom apartment measuring 764 square feet. The tester asked the leasing agent if the family would be able to rent the apartment. The leasing agent stated that they needed to do some research and get back with the tester or the applicant. Several weeks passed, the tester didn't hear anything, so they contacted the property again. At that time, the tester was told that by Virginia law, only 2 people per bedroom were allowed. Based on that, that testing evidence, the Human Rights Commission filed a complaint. And during the investigation, we shared with the housing provider that the interaction was recorded, and we informed them of HUD's general occupancy guidance, 2 people per bedroom, but exceptions can be made for age of children, size of the bedrooms, layout of the unit. We successfully conciliated that case to include a $2,000 monetary payment to the county, staff attending fair housing training, inclusion of the Equal Housing Opportunity logo on the apartment community's website, and the respondents submitting their occupancy policy to our office for review and approval, and then distribution to residents and staff. With this case, we promoted awareness of and compliance with the fair housing law by providing education to the responding and staff about occupancy standards while enforcing the law by requiring them to submit that policy to us for approval to ensure that it was compliant with the Fair Housing Act.
Thank you, Deanda. And now this is a term I'm not familiar with, and maybe it is common in the housing space, but the conciliation, is that, can you talk a little bit about that, what you mean by conciliation?
More people probably have heard of mediation, but conciliation is pretty similar or a little bit more formal. Conciliation, while we as a Fair Housing Assistance Program are mandated to offer it to everyone in complainants and respondents in a case, it's a voluntary process to get parties to agree to terms for settlement rather than go through the investigative process, or if the commission finds reasonable cause prior to issuing the charge of discrimination, parties can again attempt to reach or agree to terms for settlement in lieu of litigation. So again, it's like mediation, and we see it as very cost effective and timely because we all know that litigation can be expensive. There's practically no timeline on that. It all depends on courts, depositions, motions, hearings, and so forth. But again, conciliation is a way to get people together to resolve the dispute. Or in this case, the discrimination.
And I had another question too. The follow-up from the tester to with the unit, the folks in the unit was, you said, a few weeks. Do you have a time frame, either based on this example or just in general of when to follow up? Like how many weeks do you allow to pass before there's follow-up?
That I think would be a question best answered by Sue McClanahan. We fund the test, but I'm pretty sure that they may determine on their end when to follow up with the housing provider to determine if, and what type of testing evidence would be needed.
Thank you. Thank you. And Amanda, we have the same question for you. Amanda is with the District of Columbia Office of Human Rights and Equity. Similar question, quick story about your fair housing testing that you funded and from there. And there's Amanda.
Sure. So I'm Amanda Schlenner. Hello, everyone. In DC, we're a couple of iterations behind Fairfax in terms of our testing program. So I don't have any stories as of yet that I can share for, successful enforcement actions that we've had. I can talk a little bit about some lessons learned. So in doing our testing, and these are lessons I've learned in work throughout several jurisdictions in this area, the tests that we set up are test and retest. So for every test that comes up with some sort of, potential violation of the Fair Housing Act, we ask our testing contractor to go back and retest. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, we want to confirm that the discrimination is happening. But number two, our primary goal with the testing enforcement is voluntary compliance with the law. And we have found it's much easier to negotiate with respondents, housing providers, when they can't come back and say, oh, well, that was just a new person that was in training. That's just one time that happened. So we found that this kind of test and retest method is a lot more effective in helping us reach those voluntary compliance agreements. So much like Deanda mentioned with conciliation, our goal is to work with the housing providers to come up with what we're calling voluntary compliance agreements that essentially outline public interest relief that we're asking. So things that we're asking in the good of public interest, we're asking these housing providers to attend training. We're asking them to modify policies. We're asking them to do publication of our material, specifically with source of income testing. We designed a poster that was specifically for the purpose of the testing and the respondents who needed some education about the testing, but asking them to put the information on their website, asking them to include the information in their tenant new welcome packages, that sort of thing. So I think with our testing in general, we're not looking to, we're not looking for some sort of negative result. We're looking for the public interest. So we're hoping our ideal scenario would be for 100% voluntary compliance. Now, whether we're able to reach that with the current batch of tests that we have that we are enforcing, I can't say for sure, but it's been pretty positive so far. And again, I think that's a lot to do with the test and retest. So I see a question in the chat that I can answer. In our statute, we have a mechanism called a director's inquiry. So the director of our agency, on their own initiative, can file a complaint on behalf of the public and public interest. We do not specifically reach out to the respondents, the housing providers, before filing a formal complaint. That is really the first step for us, is documenting this issue and notifying them of this issue. And so the director's inquiry charge is essentially that notification that you're not in compliance. I would say that's for our testing. With our individual housing cases, yes, a lot of times we do that. We try and mediate with the landlord before we even file a charge. But with the testing, it's a little bit more formal, so we are filing actual complaints.
Thank you for that, Amanda. And we're going to Christine Hong with the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. Christine, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the testing that you conducted working with the Equal Rights Center and how you decided to bring the results of those tests to the MCCR, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to this important meeting. So it was the evolution over time, and I am currently part of Montgomery County government. But prior to that, I had been working at a nonprofit for 17 years in homeless services and had observed the direct impact of the housing discrimination on households that were trying to exit homelessness. In some cases, they had been housed. And I remember one case vividly where the family, there were two children with severe disabilities, and the landlord decided not to renew their lease. And we asked many times, and we never received a response that made sense. And so I, early, early in my career, I remember thinking that this is something we have to continue to bring up and raise with our elected officials. And a few years before I had started with county government, which was only 2.5 years ago, I raised it with some council members, and they eventually did sponsor what's now called the Housing Justice Act in Montgomery County. It's a ban the box legislation that prevents landlords from declining housing applications as a result of criminal background checks. But basically, it was a long journey for Montgomery County to get to the point where we started to do testing. And one of the things that started to happen as a result of the realization that housing discrimination impacts many households experiencing homelessness, whether it was the cause or is a major barrier to them exiting homelessness. So, Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, which is the unit within the Department of Health and Human Services that I currently lead, they started to compile a database of suspected discrimination. So whenever there was a case manager or housing locator that suspected a landlord was declining individuals as a result of discrimination, whether it was the source of income or the disability or the criminal background, we started to compile that. Now, this information also went to our Office of Human Rights. However, the challenge was most tenants that we worked with were not interested in filing a complaint themselves. They just wanted to get housed. So that posed a significant challenge for us in trying to get to enforcement. And I remember there was a turning point where I just felt that more had to be done. There was an individual whose landlord was not renewing their lease. This is someone who had been experiencing homelessness and got rehoused. And there were some disruptive behaviors, and the landlord came to our housing locator who made the connection to housing and said, "You should have told me this individual had a mental illness. I never would have leased to them." So, just speaking with frankness, but clearly saying things that were discriminatory and illegal. And I remember bringing this up to the director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs after I joined county government. And he said, you know what we need to do is we need to do fair housing testing. And he had experience with the Equal Rights Center in his work in the district. And I was able to identify a small amount of local funds within Services to End and Prevent Homelessness and quickly created a small contract with the Equal Rights Center. And right away, they started testing using the information from the database. So the households who we believed were impacted by housing discrimination. And I remember they tested 18 properties and found that 11 of them had suspected discriminatory practices based on the testing. And interestingly, The county office of the county attorney, they have a lens and they look at things, and they have their reasons for declining to move forward in investigating and litigating these cases of discrimination. And so I just felt that we had to find a way to um, look towards enforcement. Otherwise, the challenge would continue to occur for the many, many households experiencing homelessness in Montgomery County. And thankfully, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights was open to receiving these requests to investigate. And many thanks to the Equal Rights Center for also helping to make that connection. But it just made sense that we had to use these findings and move forward towards enforcement. And so we submitted those, I believe it was 10 properties actually that we ended up moving forward to the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And I think I'll stop there because I know that Dr. Horton might want to continue in sharing the next steps that happened after that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yes, Dr. Horton, if you could continue and talk about your experience in, excuse me, the enforcement actions that you took on the testing
Yep,
that
absolutely.
was held.
Yep, absolutely. So good morning, everybody. I'm Cleveland Horton. I serve as the executive director for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. So I've been called many things, but this is the first time I've been called doctor. So I'll accept it. I'm not an official doctor, but I will absolutely accept it. So
That came out of my mouth.
it's
Sorry.
fine. It is completely fine. So I do want to again just thank Christine. I know we had several conversations about our process and what we would need for a commission initiated complaint to accept these complaints. So we do know as the state's enforcement agency, for us, it is a priority for us not just to kind of sit back and wait for the complaints to come to us. We've tried to figure out how we can be more proactive and aggressive around addressing fair housing complaints. And we've made commission initiated complaints a priority moving forward so that we can try to address issues that we know exist within many of our communities. So when Christine brought these issues to me, I felt like it was a no-brainer, right? I felt like this was a need for us to kind of expedite and figure out how we can use our enforcement authority to issue a commission initiated complaint and move forward with addressing these issues. So for those who don't know, part of our commission initiated complaint is that when folks bring us information, and that's credible information, right? And information that we kind of can verify initially through a credible source, like testing, to ensure that the testing has been done in a consistent, official manner. We then take that information and we submit it to our Board of Commissioners. We do have a 9-member Board of Commissioners, and our statute requires that we get at least 3 of those commissioners to agree to sign off on a commission-initiated complaint. And typically when that's done, it is that we acknowledge that on its face, there's been a violation of Title 20. And that way we can move forward with a commission-initiated complaint. So when Christine brought the testing to it in conjunction with ERC, and I definitely don't want to leave ERC out because I know that Susie and ERC have played a critical role in kind of forming this what I'll call partnership, right, as we continue to move forward. So I definitely want to highlight Susan McClanahan and the work that she did to connect our agencies together as well, to make sure that we were moving forward in the right direction. So once we got the testing information, I was able to kind of review the information to ensure, one, that we felt like it was enough information that we would consider to be potentially, on its face, a violation of our statute to be able to submit it to our commissioners for consideration for a commission-initiated complaint. So I reviewed it, determined that it was, submitted to our commissioners, asked for my recommendation was that we issue a commission-initiated complaint. We were able to get 3 of our commissioners to sign off on it. And then we initiated the commission-initiated complaint. And from there, it kind of follows our typical investigative process, right, where it's assigned to an investigator. We go through, gather information from the respondent, utilizing the information that we've already gotten from the test, the testing information. allow the respondent to respond, provide us any policies or procedures that they use that would support their position and in reference to any particular policy or practice that is in question. So we were able to resolve the complaints that were provided to us that were part of kind of the testing piece. We were able to resolve, I believe, all of those complaints. We did get a substantial amount of funds that were contributed to our Civil Rights Enforcement Fund. And for those who don't know, the Civil Rights Enforcement Fund is like a joint fund that's held by the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights as well as the Attorney General's office. We each kind of have allocated resources to that fund that support both of our agencies that allow us to continue with civil rights enforcement and education and outreach efforts throughout our entire state. So in conjunction with that, we also were able to get training, a number of different training things. Some of them were on the distribution of short-term housing and resolution programs. We had the implementation of source of income anti-discrimination policies. There was a number of hours of fair housing training that their employees were required to go through, specifically around source of income training. We wanted to also to make sure that the fair housing posters were displayed within all of these communities and properties so that folks knew what their rights were and who to contact if their rights were violated. So those were some of the non-monetary relief that we were able to get from a training standpoint, because our goal is not just to support the Civil Rights Enforcement Fund, but our priority is to make sure that this type of activity doesn't happen again. So our important part is around policy and practice. So how do we change the policies? How do we ensure that these practices discontinue immediately as we continue to move forward? So that's always our priority. But having funds going to the Civil Rights Enforcement Fund also allows us to expand investigations, right? So if we want to partner with testing organizations to do other tests in other parts of the state, we can utilize funds, for instance, from the Civil Rights Enforcement Fund. If we're doing education and outreach events for the state in different areas, we can kind of use some of these funds from the Civil Rights Enforcement Fund to support those as well. So it is an effort to make sure that not that we just address the current instances of discrimination, but that we impact it for the future as well. So from a training, from a civil rights enforcement supporting standpoint, we believe that we were able to accomplish that through this relief that we were able to get through each of these complaints that we had. So again, I just want to thank Christine, who I know was aggressive in saying that, hey, this is the issue that we need to address, and we just want to thank her for bringing this to our attention, so that we were able to bring this to some resolution as we did.
Thank you for that, Cleveland. And I think you just sort of emphasized the point that connection between agencies and between organizations really can help advance everybody's goals in whatever part of the spectrum you're in terms of identifying violations, bringing them forward, and enforcing them.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, Kim, because I think that is a very important part, because I think as an enforcement agency, right? So obviously we cover the entire state, and we tell everybody it's nearly impossible for us to know everything that's going on in every locale. It's just impossible, right? One, we don't have enough staff to do that, right? So when we think about the importance of partnerships, right? So it is important for us to partner with folks like the ERC, who have more boots on the ground, who are more closely connected to the issues in any particular community, that can then bring those issues to our attention, so that we're now made aware of them and kind of figure out strategically how can we help address the issues. So the partnerships are vitally important. One of the things I think about is, here in the state, we do have the Maryland Association of Human Rights Agencies, where we kind of communicate with each other from an enforcement perspective on how we all can be better to address issues. And I think I see Asha, who's the director of the Anne Arundel County Office of Human Rights, who serves a vital role in that association as well. But those partnerships are all important. So we're constantly communicating with each other, identifying issues, how we can support each other, how do we allocate resources, what training is needed. All of those things are important. But again, just having those other partnerships with, again, folks like the Equal Rights Center, folks like Christine and her organizations, folks like I see Lisa Sarro's on the call, right? So I think there's just a whole host of partnerships that play a vital role in all of us making sure that we're supporting fair housing throughout our entire state.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And we're going to move on to Hillary Chapman, who is with the Metro Washington Council of Governments. She is Dan's counterpart in the DC area. Hillary, and I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about your goals in terms of enforcement, fair housing enforcement that are part of your 2023 regional housing plan, and what has since 2023, what have you found? What kind of progress have you made towards those goals?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you. Thanks, Dan, for the invitation. I, of course, have to shout out a few of my partners who are here today. Amanda Schlenner was, when she was at Fairfax, was a key part of our fair housing planning process. Deanda, I know I know you came after the plan was coming, but it's great to be connected with you and the work that you're doing. Of course, I'm also a certified member of the Susie McClanahan fan club here, who was a key part of our community advisory committee, and I'll touch on that a little bit. And of course, Christine Hong, who, in addition to the important role that she plays in Montgomery County and Homeless Services, also is the chair of our regional homeless services committee here at WashCOG too. So it's always wonderful to see and to be here with them, and an honor to be here with everyone this morning. So I want to before I sort of answer your question, I just want to take a quick step back in terms of sort of our plan itself and how it relates to testing and enforcement. So as you know, I'm sure everyone here knows too, so our plan covers 2 states in the District of Columbia. And as a result, the goals in our plan are pretty broad and limited. Now, we did that with intention at the time, and the goal was to choose a smaller number of goals that have a greater impact. But it was difficult to find ones that were relevant in really detailed ways to all of our participating jurisdictions. So what we did is we created 7 broad goals, and then as necessary, sort of additional sort of jurisdiction specific actions. But it was pretty light in terms of the level of implementation and prescription, with regards to things like testing, enforcement, affordable housing, changes, preservation, and affordable housing production, all of which were, key parts of our goals. But we did have, two goals in particular that, sort of relate to testing and enforcement. And one was relates to homeownership, and reducing inequities and discriminatory practices that limit homeownership practice and testing being, of course, a key strategy in addressing some of those, and also in terms of sort of more broadly protecting the rights of individuals with protected characteristics. One of our key strategies listed in there was to expand and increase support for fair housing, outreach, education, testing, and enforcement. And I think, similar to the way VMC went about its sort of regional fair housing plan too, we had a community advisory committee. Susie, of course, is a key part of that group and that process. And I think one of the in a land of where there are not always necessarily clear wins in regional planning, sort of the message from our partners on the community advisory committee that came through loud and clear was a push for increased testing. Each of the jurisdictions in our region were conducting testing at varying rates, and you can hear too from one, Fairfax on one end, in DC on the other jurisdictions, to testing limited categories at rather infrequent durations. And so the push was to both sort of in two categories. One, to push increased testing across protected classes and to increase the frequency of those tests. And I think, sort of based on those sort of stated goals, we have seen improvements in terms of the number of jurisdictions that are conducting testing and the frequency at what that of when those tests take place. So not just every 3 years, like, once a year, multiple classes. And so, in terms of enforcement, I think that's the reason that we're here today. There's not always a clear line between that increase in that we have been able to draw distinctly yet in terms of increased testing and resulting increased numbers of enforcement. But we think that just, frankly, the ability to increase the investigative side of things has had a positive impact.
Okay, that's good to know. So a couple things. They can.
Kim, you're mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
But you have gone from every 3-year testing to 1 year every year testing.
So that's just that's not across the board. So this is the blessing and the curse of our plan. That's just one. That's an example from one jurisdiction.
Okay.
We had 8 participating jurisdictions, and it was left to those individual jurisdictions to decide, based on primarily budgetary issues, how much they could increase the frequency of those tests.
And is there anyone else on the call who has a comment regarding the regional plan or the WashCog plan? Okay, so thank you for that, Hillary. And we're going to move on to Susie Clanahan with the Equal Rights Center. And I have a question for you, and then I also wondered if you would go back to what we were talking with Amanda about, and I'll follow up with that after asking this question. So what were the inputs when the Equal Rights Center has done testing that's resulted in enforcement? What were the key inputs to get to that step?
Yeah, thanks so much for putting this together. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Susie McClanahan. I'm the Fair Housing Director at Equal Rights Center. And also just want to shout out everyone else on this panel. Really excited to be with you all, and really grateful for our partnerships. I would say that as far as testing goes, so our staff are trained to be highly objective fact finders when conducting testing. So our role is not to try to catch someone. Our goal is to say simply what is going on in the housing market right now. And so many of our tests will show that there was, no signs of discrimination during that test. But unfortunately, what we see when we do testing is that still there is both blatant and more nuanced discrimination at play. And Dan, yes, so sorry. My computer still thinks it's a snow day and has been crashing every time I turn my camera on during this call. So I am here, but I'm afraid that the moment I turn my camera on, I won't be. So apologies for that.
I just want to make sure you weren't mistakenly keeping your camera off.
No, I've rejoined this call 3 times already because my computer is convinced that the weather means it doesn't need to work. But so when we identify discrimination in those tests, we will outline for jurisdictions, why we believe potential discrimination occurred, what we identified. As Amanda and Deanna both spoke about, in other jurisdictions like DC and Virginia, we can actually record tests, which means that they can actually access the recordings and listen to it themselves, and make their own independent determination whether to open an inquiry. In Maryland, we write detailed narratives for all of our tests, but would love to be in a position in the future if the state legislator will pass a bill to make it possible to record, to also be able to provide local jurisdictions with recorded tests as well as part of enforcement. But we have had partners like MCCR who have been able to review written test narratives for tests that we weren't able to record, and review those files for investigating discrimination. So ultimately, I would say that, it's about just being very objective and sticking to the facts and providing that information for review for investigations is what's really critical.
Thank you for that. I truly appreciate the approach of doing research, or it's almost journalistic, just finding the facts, not necessarily looking at it with a punitive lens of finding things wrong. And Susie, what do you think local governments can do to best position the testing that they fund so it can lead to enforcement? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, so I think that in cases where, for instance, we've had partnerships with the DC Office of Human Rights, Fairfax County OREP, where the agencies that are conducting the testing are also enforcement agencies and can take action directly. In other cases, funding may come from like a local DHCD, and then it can be helpful to have a partner, whether it's MCCR or a local human rights office, that can then accept referrals for that testing, and open director's inquiries or other forms of complaints when appropriate, should we identify potential discrimination in that testing.
Thank you for that. That was great. Okay, so going to move on to Jonathan Smith, who's here from the Office of the Attorney General. And the question for you, John, is have local governments played a role with your agency in pursuing fair housing enforcement? And if they have, do you have any tips or suggestions on what everyone on this call could do to pursue enforcement?
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you. It's good to be here. And it's good to see so many friends and see so many new people that I don't know in this important area of work. Let me start by talking a little bit about the Office of the Civil Rights Division and the Office of the Attorney General, just so people can have a frame of reference about who we are. We just crossed our 2-year threshold of existence. The Office of the Civil Rights Division was founded in January 1st of 2024. I don't know whether that makes us new anymore. I keep saying we're new, but maybe at some point after 2 years, we've moved from the infant stage to the toddler stage or something like that in terms of our development. But the Attorney General, prior to the 23 General Assembly session, did not have the authority to enforce civil rights laws, and was given that authority in the 23 session. And the Office of Civil Rights, the Civil Rights Division, was formed in response to that authority, is to be able to bring those kinds of cases. Our authority extends to any federal or state civil rights anti-discrimination statute. And so we can bring cases across a broad range of issues, although housing is one of our priorities, is a priority for the Attorney General, and it's a priority for the Civil Rights Division moving forward. We are set up not to handle individual complaints or to work on cases where that would otherwise be appropriate to be handled by the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights or other local human rights agencies. The office is designed to work on high impact or systemic kinds of matters, so that we, as we approach those cases, we look at them through the lens of, is there a policy, practice, or procedure at stake here? Is this an emerging practice that's happening across an industry where if we can stop it in one place, it'll have a broader impact? Are there a large number of people? Is this a leader in the industry? Is this someone who is influential, will make a difference? Is there, is it a large, housing provider, et cetera? So we have a series of criteria that we will use to assess whether or not these are cases that are more of the systemic nature or have a high impact involved, or whether they're more targeted at an individual dispute that should be resolved through an agency that's designed to more effectively address those individual cases. We're a relatively small office. We have a county meter of a lawyer. We have an office of 8 lawyers, 3 investigators, and a paralegal, and are designed to bring those kinds of cases. We have not yet had the opportunity to work with local human rights agencies, although we would love to do so. We've had a very successful partnership in 2 cases with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. One of them, an important housing case in Frederick that we worked on together that it affected the use of people who used housing vouchers, and was able to both ensure that the practice ended, as well as we were able to provide restitution and programmatic relief and systemic relief to ensure that the housing provider changed its practices going forward. So it's the office is really set up to do those kinds of cases, and we very much look forward to those partnerships. We think that Cleveland and I have talked frequently about this, or I should say, I'm sorry, Dr. Horton and I have talked frequently about the importance of when we can join forces and working together, that it's far more powerful, and that we can bring the resources of 2 agencies, not just the human resources, but the knowledge and experience and different approaches that we take. And so sometimes the approach of the Civil Rights Division, which is very much enforcement forward and not investigatory in the same way, and not conciliate. We don't have a conciliation obligation. We don't have through the kind of complaint process is more appropriate. Sometimes the approach of the Human Rights Agency and the way and the practice that they bring to it is the more appropriate way to address a strategy. Testing, we have just started to do testing, and we approach it somewhat, I think, differently than many of the folks on this call. We've just dipped our toe in the water. In part, that's because we've been building the agency over the last couple of years, as well as the need to put together the resources to do it. Rather than doing the kind of surveillance testing, which is so critical that people on this call are doing to sort of identify potential areas where you might have illegal discrimination taking place, and testing across that broad spectrum of agencies. The testing that we're currently have done and are contemplating doing, or where we have already developed an investigation, we have strong indicia that there is discrimination, we're pursuing an enforcement action, and we're using the test to confirm that the discrimination that we've identified, either through the experience of persons who've been victimized by it, through discriminatory advertising, or that we've seen, or through other information that may have come. We've may open an investigation in one area, and as we start to dig in, we understand that there's other forms of discrimination that are worth testing by that defendant or that target of the investigation. And so that our testing practices, at least for the moment, are not those surveillance testing, looking for whether people are engaged in discriminatory practices or not. By the time we've made a decision that we will want to engage in testing, we already have fairly strong evidence that there's something there that we want to confirm, and we want to understand better the scope and nature of the discrimination. So I would welcome conversation with any of the local jurisdictions on the call, and certainly ongoing conversation with MCCR about ways in which we can continue to partner together in the kinds of cases where the tools and strategies that we have available to us will complement the tools and strategies that others might have in order to go after the discrimination that we know is taking place, across the state. As we talk to organizations that work with people who are coming home from prison and understand the challenges that people face getting access to housing. When we talk to people who, when it takes 7 or 8 or 9 months for someone to place a housing voucher, and we know across the state that there's communities where people cannot place housing vouchers. When we talk to women-headed households that are having trouble finding residences, or immigrants that are being turned away or charged extra because they do or do not have a social security number. We know those are all areas and practices that are widespread. And if we can find the right targets and the right levers, we might be able to make a difference across the industry, not just to that individual housing provider. And those are the kinds of cases we're really looking to partner with people on. So it's a real honor to be here. I look forward to further conversation with folks. But that's the way we go about testing and the way that we see our partnerships.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was really informative, and it's really good to hear at the state level that the priorities are aligned with the local level and the regional level, and that you have a partner with MCCR. I'm going to ask Cleveland to talk in a moment. First, I want to say, Cleveland, that I'm glad that if you're going to be called something, it would be doctor, and that's kind of come up in this call. I don't know, that's kind of funny, and I hope that sits okay with you. And I also thought it was very interesting to hear you talk, the way you talked, John, about it's the relationship and the connection that you have with MCCR and with Cleveland, and how you're talking through how these partnerships can work. And I think that's the value of this panel, is really getting a connection, a sense of connection between the different layers and levels that this fair housing testing can take place. And to that thought, Cleveland, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit of what are the elements that you're looking for in a referral for enforcement.
Yeah, so I would say thank you for that, Kim. And I absolutely don't mind the doctor reference. They always say claim it right before it happens, so I'll claim it. So and again, I just want to add to Jonathan's point. I think we have tremendously valued the partnership that we've had with the Office of the Attorney General. I think, just like Jonathan said, we are open to any partnership similar to that. But I will tell, and I think, I'm sure Jonathan will get a kick out of this one, but, partnerships are hard, right? Because many of our agencies are used to operating as individual entities, right? And then, so when you kind of bring these partnerships into play, you got to kind of figure out, okay, this is how we do things. This is how you do things, right? How do we do it together? What does that look like, right? So I just urge everybody to understand that there's going to be some turbulence, right, through these partnerships. But you'll get through it and you'll get on the other side, and we are stronger together than we are apart. So I just wanted to highlight that piece of it too. But I think when we think about the question in reference to the referral piece, and I think really Susie really did kind of touch on it for the most part, is it being objective and consistent, right? So that really is, when we talk about the information that's provided to us as an agency, we do want to make sure that it is very objective, that there's been no bias included in any of the tests, and that the tests have been consistent, right? So that if you've got, 15 different testers, that all 15 testers were utilizing the same testing methodology, because inconsistency impacts the data and impacts our ability to fully enforce any potential violation. So that really is what the two primary things that we look for, which again, I'll just highlight that the information that we got from Christine was highly objective and consistent. We also, I know Jonathan touched on a little bit, had the opportunity to also investigate some cases that were happening out in Frederick County. And we would not have been able to do that without the partnership with the Office of the Attorney General, right? But again, and I'm sure Jonathan can attest to that as well, it was important that the information that we got also was objective and consistent so that we could move forward with enforcement efforts.
Cleveland, do you have any guidelines, either printed or available on the web or in another form, for agencies to achieve consistency and objectivity? I mean, Susie, you actually talked about that as well, as far as no bias and not approaching the question process from a punitive standpoint, but from a fact-finding point of view. Are those sorts of practices spelled out anywhere that's available publicly or to within the field?
Yeah, so that's a good point, Ken. I think so. Typically, what we rely on is who the information is coming through, like an ERC, for instance, who really typically make sure that that is present. But you raise a good point there. I think there might be an opportunity for us to create such a document that's also available on our website. So for other organizations or entities that are considering referring information over to our agency, they have a better idea of what we're looking for. So I will definitely make note of that and pass that on to our leadership team to see if we can kind of create something and get that information up so that information is readily available. But typically, we do rely on the partnerships that we have. Most of the testing that we do get right now comes through our Equal Rights Center, who typically contacts us and forwards the information over to us, and we handle it that way. But again, there may be a need for other individuals who want to refer information over to us, and I can definitely see the importance of having that information being readily available.
You know, sort of on the point about the partnerships being hard, because I think that we all had in life that partnerships are hard, and that communication is key, and working together is key. Jonathan and John in Cleveland, do you have any tips based on your experience working together on these larger violations or potential violations on why the partnership is successful? And John, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are good lessons learned from the partnership experience. One of the things that is a real benefit to partnerships is that people bring diversity of both strategies and authorities, and that what one office could do, another office might not. What tool might be available in one place, another office might not have that tool. And so I think that that's a tremendous strength, but it's also a point of often misunderstanding, or the risk of misunderstanding is relatively high. If you don't have an express conversation very early on about what tools you're going to use, whose process you're going to follow, how you're going to take, and that's often both a question of understanding across the agency, but it's a very important tactical question, because it's depending on who the target is and what the problem you're trying to solve is. Being able to blend the two sets of strategies and authorities can be critically important. And so I think probably the one thing I would suggest is being extremely explicit from the outset of which tools are going to be used and how they're going to be used and how that's going to be sequenced and what have you. And so, it affects all kinds of things. It affects the order in which you might do things. It might affect the cadence of an investigation and an enforcement action. It might affect what remedies might ultimately be available, whose remedies are more powerful remedies. So, I mean, between MCCR and the Office of Attorney General, there's some things that we can get remedially that MCCR can't, and there's some things that MCCR can get remedially that we can't. And figuring out what are the most important things from the very beginning, so that you can structure and guide your investigation in a way that's going to ultimately address the problem in the most effective way. And so I think that, the one lesson I would suggest, is just being explicit about how you're going to approach it, what the cadence of the investigation is going to look like, what the path forward really looks like, what tools we're going to use, and then what remedies are you really seeking.
Super. And Cleveland, anything to add on to that?
I would just say the same thing. I think communication is key. I think ultimately it's important to also recognize too, when you enter into a partnership, that both agencies want the same thing, right? But sometimes we go about getting that result in different ways. So to Jonathan's point, the communication is important to really talk about what does the partnership look like? How are we going to coexist, right? Because it's like, hey, the Office of the Attorney General does things one way, we do things differently, right? Their way works for them, our way works for us, right? But together we have to figure out what's the way that works for us together as a joint partnership in a particular process. So I just think that above anything else, that communication is the most important piece of any partnership. And again, just remembering that at the end of the day, me and Jonathan both know that we want the same thing, right? To eradicate housing discrimination. And as long as we keep that as obviously our North Star and continue to communicate, we will get there.
Thank you. Thank you both. And Melissa, you had a question?
Yes, I appreciate everyone's presentation and the information that they provided. I'm at a housing authority in Annapolis, and I was just wondering if there was any involvement, if any of your organizations regarding policy issues, particularly that are being directed by HUD. Now, housing authorities are in a difficult position. As of December 22nd of 2025, HUD has issued guidance to restrict the issuance of vouchers to persons, particularly if the agency is in shortfall, and even if not, and that we are to go through an additional process per se if we want to actually issue vouchers that we normally issue under our program. And that's because of different things going on in the administration. I ask about what involvement you have on with regards to HUD and HUD guidance, because it leaves housing authorities in a very difficult positions. Oftentimes when there are fair housing issues, many times the complainants ask for a voucher as a resolution and as to remediate or resolve an issue. And we're not largely able to do that as we have maybe in the past. And it puts us in a very difficult position. So I just wondered if any of your organizations have any, what you all were doing with regards to some of the policy issues that are coming out on the federal level that are putting housing authorities in a difficult position with regards to fair housing enforcement.
I think that's a great question. John, you want to go first, or you want me to?
Go ahead. I'm happy to backfill.
Okay. So again, thanks, Melissa, for that. That's a great question. I think so. For those who don't know, we do have a continued partnership with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We do serve as a FAT, which is a Fair Housing Assistance Partner. We have obviously seen a number of the guidances that have come out from HUD that are impacting, housing authorities, FIPS, and potentially are going to impact FAPs as well. We know that for a very long time in the federal government has always kind of been seen as the floor, that as long as you covered protected classes equal to the 7 federally protected classes, then you were considered to be substantially equivalent. HUD has recently issued guidance that has now made HUD kind of like the federal government, the federal administration, the ceiling. And if you cover anything outside of those 7 protected classes, that they are now considering you to be substantially not equivalent, right? So if you cover source of income, which we do, if you cover gender identity, which we do, if you cover criminal records, they are, again, considering you to be no longer substantially equivalent, which means you will no longer be eligible to have these partnerships with HUD, which means you will lose out potentially on a lot of federal funding. So we are, and we've been in contact with our folks at the Office of the Attorney General to have these conversations in reference to the potential impacts on what this means, not just for us as a state agency, but also what it would mean for folks like agencies like you at the local housing authorities, other FIPS within our state, and the potential impact for that. And I'm sure Jonathan will speak to some of the litigation piece of it. But and we are in contact for us as an enforcement agency, other enforcement agencies throughout the country, to really see if HUD is going to move forward with what their guidance says, right? We have not seen anything as of yet where HUD has directly discontinued their partnership with other state agencies, enforcement agencies, because of these additional protected classes. We do know that though the inquiries have started. We do. I was on a call 2 days ago where a couple other states have now indicated that their HUD representatives have now inquired with them about these additional protected classes. But we here in Maryland have not received that inquiry yet. We know that New Jersey right now is going through they are the first ones to go through like their recertification process after this new guidance was issued. So we are really keeping our eyes and ears on what happens through their recertification process to see if in fact HUD does deem New Jersey to no longer be substantially equivalent because of the additional protected classes that they have as well. So we feel confident that if it happens to New Jersey, that Maryland will be next. But we are just kind of waiting out now to kind of see what happens. But we are fully aware of all of the different directives and guidances that HUD has issued. But we will, again, like we tell everybody, it doesn't impact our protections here, right? It will potentially impact us from a federal funding standpoint. But the federal administration has not and cannot impact our federal protections here with Title 20. So even though they are adamantly about going after those who protect gender identity, criminal records, and source of income, as a state, we are not going to revert back to no longer protecting those groups. We're going to continue to protect those groups, and we want to make sure that the public understands that they still have the same rights under our state statute as they've always had, and we'll continue to enforce fully to the authority that we have under Title 20. Again, we may see some diminution in our federal funding, but again, we'll continue to address that. And we have great contacts and litigation partners at the Office of the Attorney General and in fact, when that does happen, we will again have conversations with them to determine what is the best course of action moving forward. And Jonathan, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Cleveland. Yes, and that's right. And we've I can't tell you how much time we've actually spent thinking through this question about when and how litigation might be focused around the FAPs. We believe quite strongly that what they're doing to any of the human services agencies who are FAPs violates the Administrative Procedures Act as well as the Fair Housing Act and federal law. And there's a multi-state coalition of attorneys generals that are working on that issue. I want to go back though to a minute to about just vouchers more generally and the kinds of what we're seeing for the assault out of HUD on subsidized and assisted housing programs. And even pull the lens back just a little bit further. When shortly after the election, the Office of the Attorney General recognized that there would be a need for us to be able to protect the state of Maryland from actions that were going to come out of the federal government. And the Attorney General formed what we call our Federal Accountability Unit, which is a unit in the Civil Division of the Office of the Attorney General. It's made up of a group of about a dozen lawyers and investigators. And we, in that unit, the Civil Rights Division coordinates very closely on anything that touches on civil rights with that division. And that unit also works, and there's a national network of Democratic attorneys generals and some Democratic governors in states where there are Republican attorney generals to coordinate efforts to try to address conduct by the federal government that may be harming the states. And a lot of that work has been around the restrictions that are being placed on federal funding. We're moving a little bit away from that now because a lot of the funding attacks, have moved out of the kind of executive order space into the regulatory space. And so there's a lot happening more at the regulatory level. Our office is engaged in nearly 50 pieces of litigation with regard to federal accountability. And increasingly, those are focused on areas that we do care about in the civil rights space. You may have seen most recently that we're engaged in litigation around the restrictions being placed on the continuum of care funding for housing and the use of vouchers there, which have had an enormous impact and loss of flexibility and loss of funding for the state of Maryland. I'm unaware of some of the things that you had mentioned earlier. I was not aware of the restrictions being placed on the use of housing vouchers. I know that in the most recent budget, there was an effort to try to dramatically reduce the available housing funding and to block grant it rather than to put it into the 8 or so streams of money that went into funding funding housing. And so what I would, and maybe this is a conversation we ought to have separately from this call, so I can connect you with people in our federal accountability unit. But if there is conduct out of HUD that is going to be restricting either the use of federal funds for housing vouchers or that is cutting back on housing vouchers that may not be authorized by Congress, that's the kind of case that our federal accountability unit would want to be in, at least have the opportunity to consider whether there are options that may be available for litigation. And so, we should talk separate. We should continue to talk. And I encourage people to reach out to me directly, and I can connect you up with the folks in our federal accountability. And I will be involved in those cases, but will not be leading them. That would be happening in the FAU in order to direct those. But we should not. If you think that there are restrictions coming out of Washington that are either not supported by statute, not properly promulgated under the Administrative Procedures Act, are going to have an impact on your ability to deliver services, to use federal funds, please reach out. We want to at least have a chance to talk to you about that and figure out if there's something that can be done.
Thank you, Melissa, for that question, and Jonathan and Cleveland for your answers. And we're getting close to our time, so I want to see. Well, Hillary has a comment, and thank you for that comment, Hillary. And I feel like your second question, really, Jonathan, just addressed it. Okay, good. So, and it's great to hear that the state serves as a not only a partner, but a shield from what is happening at the federal level. And then we have time for Asha's question, and then I'm going to turn it back to Dan. And before I read Asha's question out loud, I just want to thank Dan Pontius for putting this panel together. The goal was to learn a lot from Washington area colleagues, and I feel like we've learned a tremendous amount and appreciate you all taking the time to share your knowledge, your insights, and your experience with us. So, and thank you, Dan, for putting it together. So Asha's question is, do any of the local jurisdictions that are not FHAPs currently investigate complaints against HUD-funded properties? And anyone?
It sounds like she's asking that to the group, so.
Yeah.
And to the local jurisdictions in particular.
Yeah.
So I guess Fairfax.
I am sorry. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi. I was just wondering if any of the local, so we sometimes get complaints against properties that are privately managed, but that are HUD funded, right? So they're subsidized housing. And I was just wondering, do any of the locals take and investigate those complaints? Or if you don't, is there a reason why you don't? Anyone? All right. Well, thank you.
Okay, well, I think we're going to conclude the panel discussion here. And again, appreciate everyone's sharing of experience and knowledge, and turn it over to Dan at this point for some, I think we have time for a few more slides and
Yeah, although
thoughts.
I do want to Deanda mentioned that that the Fairfax tests were recorded, and so there are bills in the General Assembly right now. I'm going to pop a couple of links in the chat. This is the Senate bill, um, Senate Bill 180, which was heard in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee on January 22nd. John, so they had very limited testimony, but John was one of the folks testifying on that bill. And I'm going to put this is the video. You can go, I think it starts, you have to find, you can find it on the video. They're sort of split up by the bills, but you can watch. It's a relative, it's like a 20-minute hearing. So that was the hearing on the Senate bill, and that bill has passed the Senate for the last two sessions, 2024 and 2025. So that's not the problem in enacting this bill into law. Where it's gotten stuck has been in the House, in the House Judiciary Committee. And there is a House cross-filed bill by Delegate Sandy Bartlett from Anne Arundel County, who is now the chair of that committee. And here is the link to the House bill. And that bill is coming up for a hearing on February 24th. So that hearing will be pretty important. And so we should probably come to the jurisdictions who want to support that and organizations probably come up with a strategy for that hearing. But since the sponsor is now the chair, it seems like this could be our best chance of getting that bill passed and becoming the 40th state that can record fair housing tests. All right, and then I'm going to dig into another area. I'm going to totally shift gears. It still relates to our fair housing plan, but it's related to the low-income housing tax credits. And so if folks, I understand if the enforcement folks want to drop off, but for anyone who wants to continue, I'm going to bring up some slides here, some more slides. This is, let me get this to display mode here. Okay, so this is this is an analysis of this is another action step from our 2025 plan. This is action step number 4. This action step is designed to kind of combat the redlining of the 1930s. Back in the 1930s, the federal government kind of advised banks where to make the lowest interest, best wealth building home ownership loans, and those were in the restricted white areas. That's how white folks got a huge leg up on wealth building through home ownership. And then they redlined areas with people of color in them and immigrants, and that's where they put all the public housing. So so let's see. So and then that pattern is remarkably persistent. So in many ways, the affordable housing tends to be located in lower income areas. And so there have been a couple of fair housing complaints over the years that have resulted in more housing being located in areas of opportunity. And we, starting in our 2020 plan and continuing into this one, set a goal of making sure that the awards, that statewide tax credit awards are kind of fair share, about half of the states. We're about half of the state's population. And I'm sorry, I am going to try this again here because I can't see folks, and let me do this again. So we want to get our half of the tax credits that are allocated in the state, and then we want most of those, like 65%, to go in areas of opportunity. And this last cycle was pretty interesting. What we've generally done is looked at 9% tax credits. Those are the more valuable tax credits, the ones that are really competitive. And if you look at this graph, this shows that we did get about half of the statewide awards. The rust-colored bars are our goal, and then the blue is what actually happened in the 2025 round. When you just look at the 9% tax credits, we didn't quite reach our 65% goal for family units and communities of opportunity. But then if you look at, so that's the highlighting that bar there. If you add in for the last few years, the state of Maryland has tried to provide an incentive for developers who are applying for the 9% tax credits to combine those with 4% credits, which are less valuable, much more automatic, because they wanted to get more units. And a number of the awardees, especially in the Baltimore region, were these twin developments. So they include 4% credits too. And so when you include all those units, and really all those units are being made possible by the 9% tax credit awards, then we do better, actually. We get even more of the statewide credits awarded. And then we're up around 70% of those units being in areas of opportunity as well. And so here, okay, this is what I just said, so I'm going to skip past this. These are the developments that were awarded 9% tax credits. The top 3 are in areas of opportunity, including a redevelopment of public housing that Melissa has, I'm sure, spent a lot of time on, redevelopment of Robinwood, another one in Arbutus, and then another redevelopment of a HUD-assisted development in Columbia. And then there were 3 awards in Baltimore City too. So what our goal says is we want to try to rebalance the historic imbalance where most of these go to lower income areas. We want most of them to be in areas of opportunity, but then we do want to preserve the ability of these tax credits to aid in revitalization in areas that have historically been redlined. And so these are 3 awards that were made in Baltimore City outside of areas of opportunity. Including one twin. You can see these are the 3 twin developments, the ones asterisked here, 2 in areas of opportunity and 1 outside. So when you just add up the 9% units, the more valuable units, it's 332. But then when you add in the 4% units, it more than doubles the total affordable housing. And these are, affordable housing units. They may not be as deeply targeted to lower income people, but you can see the total generation of affordable housing and the units, the total number of units in areas of opportunity as well. We historically have kind of been able to kind of pull together. It's not easy, as folks have mentioned, but we've been able to pull together regional comments. And in response to those comments, one year, DHCD added 2 points as an incentive to developments applicants in areas of opportunity. In the Baltimore and DC metro areas, we didn't want to just restrict it to the Baltimore area, so we suggested adding in Prince George's and Montgomery counties as well. And so there's an incentive in the metro areas, Baltimore and DC, and one in rural areas. And so looking at the outcome this year, this round, in both the Baltimore and DC areas, that's what metro opportunity and metro revitalization means. You can see that there were 5, these are developments rather than units. There were 5 developments proposed, and all of them in both the Baltimore and DC areas that were in areas of opportunity got awards. That's more than the maximum we're able to get incentives. So there's only 3 can get those 2-point incentives. So really, the incentives didn't actually make the difference here, because even the ones that otherwise scored lower still made it over the threshold. Although Robinwood did, if we go back to this slide, Robinwood redevelopment did receive state bonus points in order to help. So I think the department kind of helped along getting all of these awarded. But anyway, so that shows that and actually, if you look at the Baltimore and the DC areas, a little bit more. There were 5 awards in areas of opportunity and 4 outside of those areas. So that is also helping to kind of rebalance in terms of the historic imbalance there. So anyway, these are things that I also mentioned. So one question is, why aren't there more applications? I mean, it's good that they're all getting awarded, but why there's so many more other types of applications around the state. So then a couple of things just for folks who aren't following this as closely as some of the developers are. There are some substantial changes in the new draft QAP. One is boosting the points for mixed income from 2 points to 10 points. The way the QAP proposes to calculate these, dividing the number of market rate units by the number of affordable units and then multiplying by 10, it's kind of similar that you get maximum points. Obviously, you have equal numbers. If it's 50% market rate units, that's how you get maximum points under this proposed QAP. And that also is, we have a regional project-based voucher program that's awarded, in the teens of developments, helped finance more than 1,300 units around the region, and we've awarded 170 some vouchers. So anyway, that's an interesting change that sort of mirrors what we have tried to incentivize through our regional project-based voucher program RFPs. And then this is the scoring. This is the scoring that the state uses to award these incredibly valuable and competitive 9% tax credits. So the first one is 4.4.5 on mixed income housing. That's what the last slide was about, going from 2 to 10 points. It retains those opportunity area incentive points a few slides ago. Those are among the 4 points in these policy incentives. Lovable places, the draft proposes bumping that from 2 to 4 point possible award. But to get the 4 points, you have to offer either childcare, a library, or fresh food retail in the development. So that's a new thing to gain a couple more points. And then there are 10 points, 10 brand new points to try to move developments forward quickly. You get your maximum points, 10 points, if your development is more than 120 units, if it's got its zoning, it's all set to go, and it will close within a year. So that's just kind of a quick overview. We just DHCD just did their first listening session at the same time as we did our housing committee meeting here, but there's another one tomorrow at noon, and then a third one Thursday in the evening. And there's this email address has comments, and then here's the notice, and I can pop that in the chat too, because I don't think you can click on that in the display. But so I'm going to stop sharing here, and we're just at 11:30. So anyway, that was sort of a quick run through. I don't know if folks have any quick questions here. I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards too. But and I'm sure that was kind of a.
Hi, Dan. It's Nori Suter.
Hey, Nori.
How are you?
I'm just going to drop this.
So on the QAP and the guide issues, is BMC planning on doing any formal comments? We have some concerns on some other questions or some other new provisions in there, and we will probably ECDS will probably be sending comments. And I know that the Affordable Housing Coalition is also having a working session on Friday about the QAP and guide. But just wondering if you have any plans at this point to formally comment.
No specific plans. And it's really up to the way we have historically done this is is the Fair Housing Group, and I just kind of help facilitate this. But if everyone agrees on if we can kind of come together behind comments that would help advance our regional fair housing action steps, so historically we've commented on the balance of opportunity areas and revitalization. We've commented on choice neighborhoods as a revitalization, a fair housing revitalization strategy. We've commented on preservation, which is another goal, regional goal in our fair housing plan. So if we can come together behind what we're calling for on things like that, then we'll put comments in. Generally, those are signed by our Fair Housing Group chair, which would be Kim Zanti, and our PHA chair, which right now is Gina Gibson from Anne Arundel County, the Housing Commission. So we would need to kind of discuss that amongst ourselves. And unfortunately, we don't, this is a quicker timeline. This is a different way than DHCD has done this since I certainly have had this job. Usually there's been a long period to comment before they put out the draft, and then and that's what we've taken advantage of. Now there's sort of a pretty quick turnaround after they have the draft. So yeah, we would need to pull something together because our next fair housing group meeting isn't until March. So the PHAs are meeting on Thursday, so they can weigh in. But if there are any jurisdictions that think there are comments that relate to our regional fair housing plan that the whole idea is if we can all agree, maybe it carries more weight. Um,
I think the one thing I would
mhm.
point out, so for ACDS, one of the things that they changed, and it isn't necessarily fair housing it doesn't directly impact on fair housing, except that they have this whole new repayment plan structure in there.
Mm,
And they have eliminated what's called the contingent interest model,
mm,
which was difficult, but it allowed local jurisdictions a share in the repayment of loans. And that's a big concern for us as a
mm,
local government
mhm.
because now we won't get that share. And, obviously it used to be at the state, remembered when this was changed. And it I think now being at the county level, it is something that's very valuable to us that we get a share of the funds back earlier than under any of these models. And that will limit what kind of funds we have available to recirculate into new projects. So that is a big concern for us. And then there's this whole new section that you did point out, the housing starts now.
Mhm.
There's a lot of concern around that because as we are reading it, it requires really a project to go through most of the county zoning process before they can really even apply. Whereas right now, those two sort of run parallel. They're applying for funding, they're applying for their approvals, and then the loans proceed to closing when the final, and they're sort of dual tracked. And this could delay further housing production. So again, both of those are concerns about housing production
Mm.
and how we can reach, the goals that the state is also setting on more housing in our jurisdictions. But I just thought I would raise those for those of you on the call who are, still on the call who are with county governments who do put cash flow loans in, and you are concerned about the timeline.
Yeah, well, we can pull together a call on that if folks are interested in kind of digging into that potentially with time to and so either something like either local governments could each comment but the comments would reflect those conversations, or maybe we can all get together and submit joint comments.
Dan, you do have a
We are
question.
definitely going to be we're definitely going to put some comments in, and we haven't gone to the listening sessions yet, and we're going to attend the MAHC meeting and encourage MAHC to also highlight these issues. But I don't know, like Sylvia and Kim, I'm looking at who else is still on. You're both with county government.
And now I feel bad. I forgot I didn't get to thank our panelists before they had to drop off. But oh well, I'll send them an email.
Yeah. And Dan, we do have some more questions in the chat. One from Barksdale Haggins
Oh,
about adding points for being near mass transportation stations.
I think there are points for that now, actually. Let me try to point let's see. I can I believe, yeah, transit-oriented development, there's 8 points, which essentially are points for being near transit, because you can get a certain number of points for being next to a bus line or two bus lines. I don't have the actual specifics, but there are those already. And I see Barbara's comment. So, but I don't, yeah, there's all, we're all, I mean, Baltimore County's working on getting, you guys are almost done with the VCA, I think, right? Sylvia, I think you're close. Red Maple Place is moving forward. It's very exciting. So anyway, okay. Well, we're past, it's 11:40. I don't want to keep people here forever. But Kim and Sylvia, let's talk about, and Nori, we can talk about if maybe, I guess the comments are due a week from Monday, right? I think that's
16th. I read August.
the 16th. I think that's a Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a week from Monday.
It's 2 weeks from yesterday.
Yeah.
Is when they're due. So whether we would maybe try to pull together a call, it could be anybody who's interested late this week or early next if folks are interested. I guess that one point that you have, I guess does that relate to home funds essentially? Like local governments putting in either their own funds or home funds?
Yeah, so it would be, so it's any of the soft debt, the surplus cash loans. So, usually there's always a first lien, either bonds or a private loan. And then there's the CDA loan is in second lien. And then if there's local government funds, their third lien position. But so the lien position isn't really the issue. It's the way that cash flow is paid out every year. So currently if the local government has funds in the project, they come up with, there's a contingent interest, there's a formula, and the local governments get a share every year. So, and it depends on the amount of money that the state and the local government put in. So it could be 50% to the state, 25% to the local government, 25% stays with the developer. And they've eliminated this, which means that the state will get the bulk of the cash flow and not share with the local governments. And we use when we get repayments, they recycle back into the county, and we can use them for other projects. So it could have a limiting effect on our budget and the money that we have available. And again, I don't know. I know this is the Fair Housing Group, so I don't know if this is something you really want to spend a lot of time on. It is something that we're going to be commenting on. We're going to bring up with the Affordable Housing Coalition. So maybe that's enough. I just thought I would mention it.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I think we're down to the Fair Housing Group for the most part now.
Okay. Well, thanks. And we'll stop talking.
Well, we can
and
talk
let you
offline.
use at your meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Great.
Okay.
Good to
Bye.
see everybody. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.